Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. Week one is getting ever closer. This is probably everybody's last weekend of drafts. We've finally kind of making it to the end of draft season. I'm exhausted, but I do always love these kind of final drafts here when it kind of feels like everybody has the answers to the tests and like the ADP is so solidified. It feels like, but there are a couple of guys that we are going to be highlighting today, both risers and fallers here late in the draft season, to kind of keep in mind for your drafts over Labor Day weekend, and maybe even if you're like me and some of my college buddies, drafting the night before the season starts next Wednesday, that kind of stuff. So let's fire away. The title of this episode being just kind of late season draft strategy here. Just how are you going to approach these final couple of drafts? I want to lead things off with a guy who my eyes had adjusted to him being just kind of routinely a top 10, top 8 selection most of the time. And this was largely in best ball over the summer, but even in redraft, he felt like he was kind of not someone that you're going to see in the second round whatsoever. It's Puka Nacua. I think the Stafford fears have kind of swept the nation, it feels like, and therefore some other people have kind of jumped over him in the ADP in recent weeks. I'm going to be drawing on the ADP data from our friends over at the NFFC for the purposes of this podcast, pulled from the last week or so. So Puka Nacua, again, like I was saying, someone who was going top 7, top 8, now going early second round, right around ADP 14.65. So, Mario, if you're drafting coming up over this next week, are you liking this new price, or is the market right to be a little bit scared right now?
There's at least a couple ways you can get worried about Nacua, especially if you've already got a decent amount of exposure. I really do wonder at this point in like the fantasy football industry's history, is it possible that people are just drafting so many people drafting so many teams that they get to this point in the summer, early fall or whatever, and they're like, not so much looking at Nakua's ADP and thinking, oh, stinky, I got to lower it, as much as they're kind of like, well, I already have 3 Nacua teams, like I already have however many. And even if you're over the Stafford thing, which I kind of am, in the sense that I just think Garoppolo's good enough for Nakua's purposes. Like, I think when a guy's getting 100 plus targets on 465 snaps, the quarterback probably doesn't matter. At least in PPR, it doesn't matter. But Nacua still has a really long injury history. Before his rookie season, he had never really stayed healthy in a year. And then last year, of course, he missed the 6 games or whatever it was. So it's not just the Stafford thing. It's Nacua himself is potentially a bit, not fragile exactly, but you see the punishment he subjects himself to. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, he's in there moshing.
Yeah, so it's like you would expect someone doing those kinds of stunts to be at greater risk of injury than someone who didn't. But I still feel the need to have like a pretty resolute amount. I don't know, like some decent stake in Nacua to my broader portfolio, because if he does stay healthy, I think he's like a really good candidate to lead the league in targets and in PPR. Like, I don't care if it's John Wolford at quarterback.
I mean, I would prefer it if it was Stetson Bennett instead of Jimmy Garoppolo.
Stetson Bennett. Who cares? Like Stetson can get Nacua to like 120 catches.
Yeah, the mailman can absolutely deliver that. But I think ultimately, like you were saying here, we've probably overcorrected just a bit. Like you're saying, he Nacua can subject himself to the big hits and everything like that, and that dates back to his college career too. I don't know if he ever played like an entire full season at the college level. I think like his rookie year
was that senior year where he, I think, still missed 1 game, but I could be wrong. He got pretty close to a full season the one time, and every other year it was like 2 games, 3 games.
Yeah. So I mean that it's always been kind of a part of the deal with him. But again, ultimately we're talking about a guy with first round fantasy talent that you can get in the early seconds. So if you are playing on a format where he is going that late, I think I can give the thumbs up and say that he is not the proverbial falling knife. I think he is a nice value at that new ADP if it's anything similar to what we're seeing on the NFFC over the last week.
Yeah, I think not to go off subject, but Devontae is the guy that I worry about if Stafford's out, because as you have pointed out, he hates Jimmy Garoppolo, so that would be more of an issue, perhaps.
Yeah, I've been kind of squatting on that take for a bit. Basically, since the Stafford trailer gate happened, I'm like, oh no, wait a second. I watched that show on Netflix. Devontae hates that guy. Unfortunately, I've drafted a ton of Devontae at kind of like the
Me
peak of
too.
his ADP this year, so we're just gonna ride with it. But he now goes in the fourth round as opposed to the mid third, like he was earlier on in the summer. Let's get on over to Tyreek Hill, because I feel like the Dolphins. I mean, I'm not the only person that's saying this. Everyone kind of feels like there's disaster season potential
Oh
here
yeah.
for the Dolphins in a way that it's hard to really circle with almost any other team in the league. Like you can point to that with someone like the Saints and be like, well, yeah, it's not really going out on a limb, but a team on paper, an offense on paper as talented as one that has Tua, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devin Achane, and we've seen it, come to fruition a couple of years ago in 2022 and 2023, where they were rocking and rolling, looking like the best offense in the league. Feels like going into 2025, things are really, really teetering. Tyreek Hill is someone that I think we both routinely saw being argued for as like a late second, really strong late second round pick. He's now going late third round. And I think that some people might see that and be like, oh, I mean, Tyreek Hill, really, really fast. I mean, we've seen him, crush before. This is a good deal. I'm stopping short on that one. I don't think I'm drafting Tyreek Hill the rest of the way.
I probably won't draft him either, but that's mostly just because I have kind of too much exposure to start with. I haven't been drafting him in a month or so either, so I had a lot before. If I didn't get Garrett Wilson at that pick range, I would usually take Tyreek. Sorry, I'm not sure what Dulce is mad about. Just a second.
I can bloviate. Yeah. So ultimately, yeah, if Tyreek was earlier on in the summer going, kind of in the AJ Brown, Lad McConkey range, and yeah, now going a decent bit later, going after even Jackson Smith and Jigba, T Higgins, Garrett Wilson, and Marvin Harrison, all going ahead of Tyreek Hill.
I would not take Harrison. I will say that I would not take Harrison over Hill ever, but there are definitely some times where, in hindsight, I wish I had taken JSN over Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I've started to kind of get on that thought train sometime probably like earlier this month, where I really started wanting to get heavier exposure to JSN. I think that like you're saying about Puka, I think that there's a decent chance that JSN leads the league in catches this year. I don't think it's completely out of the question.
Especially targets, like they have nothing better to do in the passing game anyway.
No, they don't. Like as much as we like Torrey Horton, not really going to be like
But I think with Tyreek, man, it's just as you said, the Dolphins vibes are terrible. Tyreek he's made no effort to hide that he's mad at the team and doesn't want to play for them. And he's just stuck there because Chris Grier, the GM for the Dolphins, just a hideously incompetent GM, and it's crazy that there are so many guys like this in the NFL. And you look at like how long they've been ruining the team. Like 9 years that guy has been the GM, and he's just been awful the entire time. They can't really trade Tyreek. I'm sure they would like to, but the cap penalty is way too much. And it's made even more annoying that he definitely won't be on the team next year. So it's like he's trapped on the team right now, even though he and the team want him out, and he will be out next year because his cap hit goes up to like 52 million or something. But Chris Grier,
so it's like a two-way hostage situation.
Yeah, it's like it's unbelievable the amount of incompetence that went into this outcome. But Chris Greer is just immune. I don't know why, but he gets to do this stuff. And then Tyreek Hill. It is one of those couldn't happen to a nicer guy kind of things, but like he's kind of screwed over in the meantime.
Right. No, exactly. So I think at this stage, yeah, my advice to the late drafters out there would be look elsewhere. There's going to be plenty of excellent other options
Like
at
he might
wide
just leave the
receiver.
team or something. I'm not predicting that, but like if Tyreek Hill just walks off the job in week 3, would we really be like, how did this happen?
Yeah, I mean, it could happen even against the Jets, like the parallel of that in Antonio Brown also doing
Yeah.
that at the Meadowlands. Like
I will say
it,
if something somehow turns for the better here, if Tua stays healthy, if Tyreek stays healthy and plays and is more or less like I think he isn't really declining at this point. Slash, he has the speed and the start stop, the quickness to spare. Like he can get slower and still be the most explosive athlete in the NFL. But I am worried about him showing up to work, and I guess the rest of the team too.
right, and similar to the Puka Nacua discussion as well. Is can Tua make it through the entire season? That feels unfortunately like a question we just have to ask. Essentially when we're talking about the Dolphins in any context. Before we get on to our next ADP faller to break down here late in draft season, we do have a message from our pals over at Circa. Circa Million and Circa Survivor are back with a massive $21 million in guaranteed prizes. Circa Million, pick 5 games against the spread each week, 18 weeks of action with 126 ways to win. $1 million for the winner and $6 million guaranteed. Circa Survivor, 1 pick a week, no point spread, lasts the longest to win it all. At least $15 million guaranteed. Got to enter in Nevada, play from anywhere. 21 million guaranteed. Visit circusports.com for details. We also got a message from our friends over at Renegade Fantasy. Fantasy football players, aren't you done watching your season crumble because of injuries or underperforming players? Join the RotoWire League today on Renegade Fantasy app, the only app that lets you substitute players in real time. Go to rotowire.renegadefantasy.com and hit join today. With Renegade, you're not just a GM, you're the coach. No more losing Sundays, no more lost points. You call the shots, you make the moves, you win the league. Step out of the luxury box and onto the field. This is fantasy football without limits. This is Renegade Fantasy. Join the RotoWire League today and win. Visit rotowire.renegadefantasy.com and join the league today. Shout out to our friends over at Renegade and over at Circa. Next up, going over to the running back position, Breece Hall. Someone who I think when draft season opened up, wouldn't be surprised to see him, early 3rd round type of guy. The market has cooled on Breece Hall pretty significantly over the course of the summer, and it doesn't really feel like it's well reasoned at all. In the sense that it's not like Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis are amazing or have really even looked amazing, but for whatever reason, it feels like people are worried by the C word committee, and and therefore it's like, oh man, Breece Hall, like he's dust already. This is bad news Bears. So now Breece Hall going at an ADP of right around pick 45. So your thoughts there on the kind of bottom dropping out on the Breece Hall ADP?
I think it's silly. I think we already did this routine too with Braylon Allen, so I don't understand why the fan fiction contingent is so strident at this point. He's showing up at 109 in the ADP. That guy's a fullback. I am so sick of this. I mean, this is just ridiculous. He runs a 4.8. Go watch the tape. You can find players on Purdue's defense who themselves ran 4.8s and they're gaining on him in a straight line. He runs a 4.8. No one else has run a 4.8 and played running back other than like Jason Snelling or something, and no one remembers him. So who cares? If Breece Hall is vulnerable to Braylon Allen, he's vulnerable to every running back in the NFL, including Isaiah Davis, but you don't see any hype for Isaiah Davis because there wasn't any fan fiction written about him last year. The fan fiction is only about Braylon Allen, and even though to whatever extent Allen could contribute, Davis clearly could too. The narrative just leaves no room for him, and it's just this fantasy about Braylon Allen being the next James Conner. Like, James Conner ran a 4.65. This isn't James Conner. James Conner did not get caught from behind by corners running 4.8s at Purdue. So I think that aside from that too, it's just like all the actual evidence about Breece Hall as an NFL running back clearly singles him out as one of the best. Not just like a good one. Like, he's a top 10 running back in the NFL. And this is a year where the Jets are not just committed to running, like they have no choice but to run the ball. So I understand, like, people take that premise and then they take the premise that Hall's job security is in question and that Braylon Allen specifically is the threat to take it. And then they conclude, reasonably enough, it's valid logic, but it is not a sound premise to say that the Jets need to run the ball more than ever this year and won't use Breece Hall to do it primarily. It's a nonsense suggestion. And trying to make such aggressive takeaways from Aaron Glenn throwaway quotes about, like, we want to get those guys, like referring to Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, saying we want to get those guys on the field as much as possible. And people are going, wow, that means they want to bench Breece Hall. It's like, no, he's just saying something that doesn't make any sense because he doesn't care. He's not thinking that hard about it. He's issuing a non-binding generality to just kind of answer the press conference question. And I don't doubt that Braylon Allen will get some carries this year as a short yardage specialist, as a blitz pickup specialist, like a Samaje Perine type of deal. Sure, why not? Who cares? Fullbacks can play. CJ Ham's can play. It's not a big deal. But when you say CJ Ham's going to bench Dalvin Cook, that's a little bit bigger of a stretch to me.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's a great analog there. So, yeah, I think that Breece Hall is someone to definitely keep an eye on for this coming week. In your late drafts, I think that he's more than well worth it, and I think that it works out in a way where it's like knowing that you can get Breece Hall in the 4th round can kind of alter your early strategy, and especially when
I think a running back one. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
If I knew going into a draft that Breece Hall would be there for my especially late 4th round pick, I guess I would. I mean, that's probably the one time I might take Bowers or McBride or somebody, and otherwise, like, I'm probably going with a borderline 0 running back approach because if I can get a running back 1 in the late 4th, it's like, why bid in the 2nd or the 3rd?
100%. Yeah, that's kind of what I was driving at there. Like, it opens you up to just going heavy at the other positions and still feeling good about your first running back off the board, and then you can circle back and get someone like a Chuba Hubbard or James Conner, RJ Harvey, if you so prefer, in the 5th round. And then all of a sudden, like, you've kind of like made out with a really nice first 5 picks pretty quickly and pretty, painlessly, especially with Breece Hall kind of falling to you there late. And then last one for you here, Chris Godwin. This one I imagine is going to tick up a little bit in light of, his being removed from the PUP list. So maybe our date sample here isn't perfectly fitted to when that happened, but he's gone as high as pick 72 in drafts and as late as 187. So I think that there must have been like a complete, sort of panic about whether he was going to be ready for the start of the season. And everyone was like, all right, hands off, not going after that. But now ADP just around pick 100. Are you willing to dabble? Are you willing to get back in on the idea of Chris Godwin here?
Yeah, it is a little logistically challenging, I think, to pull it off because you need to get a good enough group of receivers to get you through however long Godwin is out / however long Godwin is rusty when he gets back. And just the same, like, if Godwin is back, you pretty much have to start him, in which case, like, if you had, I guess the way to get around like the bench points issue and knowing who to correctly start at receiver by kind of committing to a 4 wide receiver build when Godwin gets back. So again, because if you don't have that third sufficient receiver while Godwin is hurt, then you're kind of just taking on water until Godwin is back, and at that point, the benefit of his return might not be enough to get you into the playoff position or whatever. So if you have the sufficient wide receiver depth while Godwin is out and Godwin comes back, and you start him as your fourth receiver, flex starter or whatever, that would work, I think, pretty well. Maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I think clearly the Buccaneers expected Godwin to be more or less available this year, more or less be himself. Otherwise, they wouldn't have given him that contract. And they would have put him on the PUP list as a more recent indicator. So I think we can be somewhat optimistic that, yeah, it's going to be annoying while he's out. But when Godwin is back, and if he is Chris Godwin, he's like a top 20 fantasy receiver. And if it requires pushing Egbuka out to the flanker spot and just generally making Egbuka borderline irrelevant in the offense, then that's exactly what will happen, because Chris Godwin is close to peerless as a slot receiver. And if he's there, he's compelling. So I think, especially at the 10th round price tag, it's like, who cares? Like, people are taking ridiculous picks all the time in that range, and Chris Godwin, if he gives you so much as 8 games, I think pays off there.
I think so too, and I think that there's hopefully room for more, and we see him by mid-September. I'm not drafting him at this price, assuming that he's ready to rock and completely 100% Chris Godwin in week 1. But for instance, last night did an auction league or salary cap draft with a bunch of other industry guys, our old pal DVR and a couple others. And someone tried to sneak through Chris Godwin for 2 out of a $200 budget. And I pretty much
wasn't having it.
Nope. I had a one last multi-dollar buy to make. So I jumped that one up and got him for 3. And also for anyone that does the salary cap drafts out there, Jordan Addison, I feel like, is another guy that the market is a little bit afraid of, just because they see the suspended icon next to him. Also got him for 3. So took on a little bit of risk for a grand total of 3% of my auction bankroll.
I like it.
I think that's fine.
You got a bit of a winter to make it through, but if you do, that's a strong loadout.
I think I went very receiver heavy. Got CeeDee Lamb and JSN as the first 2 receivers in there. So just going to need I think Matthew Golden to kind of do at least something for the first couple weeks of the season, and then we're flying. Then we're feeling really good. All right, next up, we're going to get to some risers, but before that, got a message from our friends over at Fantasy Sports Knockout. Fantasy Sports Knockout, where a fantasy league meets a knockout pool, an innovative take on fantasy football. The concept is simple. Choose a new fantasy lineup each week and score points the same way you would in any fantasy league, but you must choose your players wisely. You can only use each player one time. The lowest weekly score or group of scores is eliminated from the contest every week. The concept may be simple, but survival is not. How will you play? Load up early or play the matchups and save the better players for later? Fantasy Sports Knockout. Can you survive the fantasy? Sign up at play.fantasysportsknockout.com today. Again, that's play.fantasysportsknockout.com today. Okay, now we're gonna get a little bit more on the buzzy guys, the guys that are rising up draft boards here late in the summer as we get ready for the season to start. Chase Brown, I feel like it is, there's orders of magnitude. It's one thing to raise from the 18th round to the 14th round, or even the 10th round. In some cases, we see that happen. Probably at least one case of that every summer or every 2 summers. But moving from a mid third rounder to a kind of early second, that's a little bit harder to pull off, especially when there's not really much in the way of injuries that are knocking guys out from that particular range and stuff like that. So all of a sudden, Chase Brown, again, someone that you're seeing go in the mid-20s earlier in draft season, now his ADP settling in around pick 16 and even above Devin Achane at this point, at least over the last week. So can you describe why that may be? And do you agree with it?
I can see the reasoning that people are using with Chase Brown. I think it's mostly that they're looking at his numbers as a 16 game player and a whatever it was 12 game starter, and sort of prorating it over, I don't know, I guess they must be projecting upwards of 800 snaps. Brown did play a lot of snaps last year, especially given how especially in the second half of the year, like after Zach Moss was out of the way. It was like 60 snaps a week. The vast majority, or the average was 60 snaps a week over that second half, and there weren't many cases where he played much less than that. Like the low snap count was 47 against Pittsburgh, and 47 snaps would probably put him among the leaders at running back even for that week. So when you're also a pass catching back like Brown is capable of being, and you project that sort of snap count, I can imagine people's projection models identifying Brown as like almost like a cheap Jahmyr Gibbs kind of thing, where it's like, well, if he's catching, 70 passes and he's running for all these big plays and he's getting all this usage in a high scoring offense, then what could possibly go wrong? And I think what makes me leery of Brown at this new price is that it wasn't that long ago that the Bengals were stingy with his playing time. And granted, this is just Zach Taylor. It looked stupid at the time. It looked worse every week afterward, but they started Zach Moss over Chase Brown, and they wouldn't give Chase Brown much more than like change of pace snaps until October. And again, I know that Zach Taylor just making a bad decision, but it's at least a reminder that Zach Taylor is capable of making weird, bad decisions. And if Taylor had some enduring gripe about Brown, and I don't know what it would be, I guess maybe blitz pickup or something like that, then I don't think that we can take it for a given that Brown will play the snap count this year that he had in the second half of last year. So if Brown it plays so few as only 45 snaps per week, he's a bust at ADP. Like, you need him to play that 60 snaps. And I'm a Taj Brooks truther. I think Samaje Perine's probably going to get more passing down work than people want. Granted, Perine is not a threat to take much usage from scrimmage, but Brooks could be the guy that they wanted Moss to be last year. And Chase Brown was not compelling from scrimmage last year. 4.3 yards per carry, 5.5 yards per target. He's a compiler. He's compiling, and you need not just a high, but one of the highest, maybe the highest snap count at running back to compile in a way that will allow him to catch up to the more rapid point accumulation of guys like Jonathan Taylor or whoever else. So, like you look at Chase Brown last year, it's like 2.8 yards from scrimmage per snap. Like Jonathan Taylor was at 2.3, and it didn't feel like a particularly good year for him,
Right. So I think, yeah, ultimately he's going to need to live up to the just having that monopoly in this backfield, and just kind of, at least in my opinion, I think the best case for Chase Brown is not just that, but just it's like you have all the snaps, like you're the guy on the field for 3 downs in what I think is probably going to be like a top 3 scoring offense. And,
Yeah.
Obviously, like we're going to see like 40 plus passing touchdowns, but I think that, there will be plenty of drives where they get down into the red zone and goal line situations. And I think that Chase Brown can, punch those opportunities in, although, important to note, Taj Brooks probably a little bit better suited for that. Guy's an absolute tank. He's so cool. Just not the normal kind of Texas Tech running back. It was wild to watch him. But I just think ultimately I always liked Chase Brown and had optimism for him, like, as a prospect or, as a rookie late on in that season. It's like, okay, he's like a worthwhile pickup. Last year, I thought once they got rid of Mixon, it's like, I do probably want to draft Chase Brown over Zach Moss.
Yes.
This is like a 10th round type of consideration. Now we're talking about him in the second round with,
15.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So it gets a little rich. Like
he's not that talented, in my opinion. Like this is a range of the draft where you should mostly be selecting star players. Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, those are stars. Chase Brown's a guy who needs the system to make him the product necessary to come through at ADP. And weirder things have happened, certainly. And if those other guys get hurt or whatever, that could be enough right there for Brown to leapfrog them and for his fantasy investors to be rewarded for it. But he needs a lot of things to go exactly right just to break even at his new cost.
Yeah, that's the thing. Even the difference between being a mid third rounder versus a mid second or mid to early second rounder, like that's a very different conversation. So we're going to need to see one of the greatest coattail riding seasons. Just having Chase Brown just be around when Joe Burrow and company get the ball into the red zone. And I think Chase Brown can do some stuff on his own. Like we're not calling him a bum or anything like that, but
he's like a top 25-ish NFL running back in a top 3 running back situation. And to me, that's more like a third round kind of this thing to personally.
And do you, looking beyond that, I know you mentioned like Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry. The cluster, if you were choosing running back between Brown, Achane, and Bucky Irving, how are you approaching that?
I definitely consider Achane a more talented player than Brown too. It's just a little tougher to, the calf thing, the Dolphins being ridiculous. Achane only weighing 185 pounds or whatever. Like Achane definitely cannot withstand safely the volume that Chase Brown can. And even though he's a smaller back too, Chase Brown took on mammoth volume at Illinois and held up fine. So I can see why people would prefer Brown over Achane. And in the case of Irving, I don't think he can hold up a whole year with the workload he had in the second half of last year. And I think Irving's ADP is very specifically driven by people who are projecting an entire season along the lines of the second half. I think Irving's clearly very good from scrimmage, including as a pass catcher, which he might do more of this year if they give less playing time to Rachaad White. But I don't trust Irving to hold up with a workload particularly close to what Chase Brown could hold up to. And I also think the Buccaneers are a good regression candidate this year. So I am not picking Irving at all.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you're right. I mean, it's hard not to get attached to like your waiver wire pickups that like kind of help you win your league down the stretch, as Bucky Irving did in so many cases last year. But really hard to hold that up. And for it's interesting how people forget the stuff that made them forget about Bucky Irving in the first place when we were doing draft season last year. It's like, well, his combine, his RAS was not very good, so he's not even going to play at all this year. And then all of a sudden he does, and he's excellent in that late season sample. So I don't know. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle for Bucky Irving, and I think that the Bucks are a team that, as constructed, would be totally, excuse me, justified in just going with that committee approach. So I'm wondering if the market has it right.
I think Tucker's good too. I mean,
I do too.
I think White clearly is not a good runner, and they might just get rid of him or something even now. But Tucker, nobody said Irving was a better running back in college than Tucker was at Syracuse. It was the Hart thing going undrafted that put Tucker behind, put him toward the bottom of the depth chart. But he's clawed his way up, and every time he gets a chance to produce, he does. So I think it helps Irving's longevity to give more work to Tucker, and I think Tucker is a realistic candidate to compel it just on his own part.
Yeah, that's, as we finish off the draft season, I think I want to grab a share or two of Sean Tucker as I make my way out the door. Let's get to our next riser, TreVeyon Henderson. I think basically since the start of preseason has been on a bit of a rocket ship here. Someone that was going in the mid 50s now goes in the mid 30s over on the NFFC. Again, this is like basically full point PPR scoring, just for everyone's knowledge, but it does feel like everyone has gotten really excited about him, and he's really closed that gap between himself and Omari and Hampton as like the 1B to the 1A of Ashton Genty in this rookie class. Or maybe Genty probably is the 1, and then you got your 2A and 2B. But regardless, Henderson now in the early 4th, late 3rd. Are you digging it?
No, and it's particularly weird to me that it was just propelled by preseason optics. specifically like a kick return and looking fast is not a sufficient reason to move a guy. What 2-3 rounds in the
Right.
ADP? What would have been grounds for raising Henderson to that degree would be like the Patriots cutting Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson and replacing them with Ronnie Rivers. That would be a reason to raise Henderson to the third round. Watching TreVeyon Henderson play apparently for the first time in your life and going, wow, he's fast. I got to raise him in my rankings. That's just crazy. You didn't get any new information from him in the preseason. There's nothing that Henderson did in the preseason that you couldn't have known prior to that from his Ohio State career or like just watching him play at Ohio State. So, if people were making a conclusion like Henderson was so good in this game, they just have to stop giving Stevenson the ball. Like I understand why a person would delude themselves into believing that, but it's a silly thing to believe. And it's not even subject to what they believe about Stevenson. Henderson has volume limitations. He got hurt the 2 years at Ohio State that they tried to make him a 3-down starter. And after 2 years of that, they said, actually, why don't we maybe have a Keyshawn Judkins type to take the worst hits off of Henderson's place so he can be the way that he is, go 125 miles per hour all the time without having to worry about his longevity. Like you can't tell a guy like Henderson to pace himself. Like he's going to go and he's going to run as hard as he can. And if you give him 20 chances to run into the teeth of the defense, he'll just do it. And eventually he's, being built like he is, 203 pounds, not particularly short either. Like I would find Henderson's volume projection better if he was 5'9" instead of the 5'11" that he is. He doesn't have much anchor, and it's going to be easy for him to get clobbered if he goes too recklessly into too perilous parts of the field. And the Patriots have a guy like Stevenson, they have Gibson, and they pretty clearly are, if nothing else, they're going to serve as the Judkins analog because the Patriots want Henderson on the field, and if you overuse him, you don't have him on the field anymore. It's not even complicated, but you get people just kind of not thinking through the logistics of football, like the material aspect of the game, and sort of just reducing everything to spreadsheets. It's more complicated than that. And at the very least, it's like, do your research before the preseason games start. Like, don't learn who players are in preseason games. That's crazy.
And from a kick return too, like something that at best is going to happen one time during the regular season.
We didn't know he was fast before. He wasn't fast for 4 years at Ohio State. He didn't run a 4.43 at the combine. We needed the preseason kickoff return to corroborate the suggestion that Henderson is somewhat fast. It's embarrassing. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the rationale.
Good player though. He's clearly a really good player. I just you can't. Being a good player doesn't turn 12 carries to 20. Like it's not how anything works.
No, I don't think so either. So hope you got your Henderson shares in the 6th round while you could, or in the 5th round while you could. Another rookie who has really risen a lot. I know we just talked a little bit about Chris Godwin in the prior segment, but Emeka Egbuka is now like firmly a 5th round guy, going pick 57. That puts him actually a little bit of Zay Flowers, which I think is kind of insane, and Jalen Waddle as well, according to the latest ADP over the last week. So Egbuka, he's probably come up from like the 9th round, I'd say, to make it to this new draft day cost. Is that is the market right to push him like this? And should you be the guy that's like, I'm getting Egbuka no matter what, or is this a bit much?
I think it's chasing a little bit. I can see the reasoning at least though, because he's a 1st round pick, all-time reception leader at Ohio State. Chris Godwin, the news just kind of got worse every day, pretty much. Maybe it's stabilized at this point, but the sentiment, the sentiment of like it's Egbuka's time, that hasn't waned at all. With Godwin with Godwin avoiding the PUP list, so I think you're going to get pretty good returns from Egbuka when Godwin is out, and he will categorically disappoint the people paying the price when Godwin is in. I don't think it's much more complicated than that. So if someone's okay with that, if someone's okay with the idea of a slow finish out of Egbuka, then if specifically they're like, I want those 35 catches in September that he's going to get. If that's a little bit high of a projection maybe, but if you're convinced, like with Godwin out, they gotta spam targets to Egbuka. And yeah, I mean, you could come out of September looking pretty good for it. I don't think I want Egbuka in October over Devontae Smith, or Zay Flowers, Jalen Waddle. Probably not Ricky Pearsall either. So I'm not taking him. Egbuka, I kind of just missed my chance, because if I was going to take him at any point, it would have been more like that 9th round one, and I wasn't taking him then because the news wasn't quite so bad on Godwin at that point. So I'm not going to have any Egbuka shares. I have some amount of anxiety about that, but I am categorically not interested at this new price.
Yeah, I'm not either. So I missed the boat as well. I've always felt like early back in draft season that the Bucks wouldn't have given Godwin that like this type of deal if they weren't feeling confident about him being ready to go this season and early on in this season. But as training camp goes on, he's not really practicing, and Ibuka, I'm sure, is making plays, and I think Baker Mayfield has had complimentary things to say
Yeah,
about the rook and everything like that.
missing too.
Right. So yeah, I think that was like kind of like the final cherry on top of like, oh yeah, I mean, we know for sure that he's getting like a ton of snaps. Should parlay that into plenty of targets and everything like that. So I just think ultimately he's definitely a good player. Like I'm not doubting him. I just think that there are other options where he goes now where the choice works against him. Whereas, if we're talking about him versus maybe like a Jacoby Myers for this year, or Debo Samuel, like or Matthew Golden, like sure, like I can definitely understand going Ibuka over them, but when it's the type of caliber of players that we were talking about, like your Pearsalls, like your Zay Flowers, Devontae Smith types, it becomes different. I have a little bit of a harder time going in with both feet with the rookie, and then topping it all off, I do think that the Bucks offense comes back to earth a little bit. What were there, like 40 passing touchdowns in this offense last year? What's it look like if it's 30?
Yeah, it's 2 out of the 3 years is like Mayfield's like a 4,000-yard, 27 touchdown quarterback, and I don't think Egbuka can come through at ADP if it's that Mayfield in 2025.
No, I'm not sure either, and I've been kind of light on Mayfield. I think that last year probably goes down as the best statistical season of his
Yeah.
career. Last one for you, Jacory Croskey-Merritt, the fantasy industry's favorite guy to talk about. I will say, in the auction draft that I was doing last night, kind of a funny story. I threw him out trying to freeze the room. I threw him out pretty early on, like probably within the first 15, 20 minutes of the auction, just kind of expecting there to be a total, like, sort of chumming of the water. And I'm just going to see all the bidding up, and, we're going to see him go for, 15 or so. And I threw him out at 5. And then one person went up to 6. And I was like, no, he can't go for 6. It's got to be a little bit better than that. So I go to 7, and then the room just. So I ended up getting stuck, and it's sort of like a wily coyote trap I set for myself, and ultimately, I've got like the ash on my face, and I'm like poking out of the cannon now. So joke's on me.
It's a good buy though. I mean, I'm of course not really indulging the Croskey-Merritt fan fiction that has been relentlessly heaved at us for the past month, but I at least regret saying a week ago that Brian Robinson is probably better. Like I don't think that's true, and that's a bad one for me. It's a bad one for the brand. It's like
You can't be saying anything good.
I bash everything Brian Robinson related up until that one point, and choked, and I was like, he might be better than someone. No, it's not possible. And Jacory Croskey-Merritt is clearly he can do some things for sure. I don't know how much volume he can withstand. Even in his big year at New Mexico, he averaged something like 14, 15 carries per game. So that's far from a heavy workload. And when you watch him run, Jacory Croskey-Merritt definitely has some explosiveness to him. He definitely runs with a hot motor. He's good at kind of getting skinny when trying to cut back, and he sees the long field very well. He's very good at like intuiting the angle he needs to run at to evade the pursuit angles that are after him. So he very quickly diagnoses like, this is the line I got to run in. Like this is the route I have to take to avoid this guy or that guy. But you look at his numbers at Alabama State, where he played 4 years. He had less than 4 yards per carry in all of them. And if it's not for a lack of explosiveness, if it's not for a lack of, just raw running ability, how does that happen? Nobody, I am pretty sure I can say nobody in NFL, I don't know, the past 25 years history has played running back even one snap in the NFL after averaging less than 4 yards per carry 4 years in a row at the FCS. Like that's just a bizarre stat. And Alabama State clearly wasn't very good, but there was a guy named Ezra Gray on that team who was out producing him. And Ezra Gray is like an Arena League guy or something. So he was bad at Alabama State basically. And I think it must speak to that. If the blocking isn't good, if the open field isn't created for him, he's kind of just liable to, I don't know, dance around and not really go anywhere. I don't think he has much power to speak of, especially from the handoff. It's like he can, Jacory Croskey-Merritt can he can stop, start, juke, and all that kind of stuff. But if you just contain him, I think he'll kind of just spin his wheels in random directions and not really go anywhere. And I think particularly as a power runner, he has just nothing at all on Chris Rodriguez. And go ahead and say anything good about Croskey-Merritt that you want. It applies to Rodriguez too. Like even on the speed question, like Rodriguez ran a 4.51, a 4.52 pro day 40. Jacory Croskey-Merritt ran a 4.47 pro day 40. That's like barely within the margin of error. And when you notice that Rodriguez is upwards of 15 pounds heavier, I mean, the vision too, like you go watch Chris Rodriguez at Kentucky, go watch Chris Rodriguez at any point. All he did was dominate. Chris Rodriguez is a good player, and it's only for political, myopic political reasons that he hasn't gotten the chance to prove it to this point. It is totally possible that Cliff Kingsbury or whoever wants to just make a meme out of Jacory Croskey-Merritt. Maybe they're just hell bent on it. Like we're gonna get him going. We don't care how good Rodriguez is. But in practice, I'm not convinced they can stick with that. I think the Washington offense is going to regress this year a little bit, and I think their margins are going to get stressed in a way that they weren't last year. If they go to Chris Rodriguez for short yardage stuff, like Dan Quinn suggested they might, that's a big problem for Croskey-Merritt. And I think Croskey-Merritt clearly is a big problem for Rodriguez too. It's going to be a committee, in my opinion, and it's why I'm not really racing to draft either of them. But as far as the price go, Rodriguez is still not expensive at all, and Jacory Croskey-Merritt's going to cost you like a 7th round pick or something ridiculous. So
trending that way.
Yeah, and it's like if Jacory Croskey-Merritt gets every one of the 187 carries that went to Brian Robinson last year, he's still not cleanly clearing that ADP, in my opinion. So Austin Eckler is going to catch 50, 60 passes. If Rodriguez gets so many as 4 rushing touchdowns this year, I don't see how Croskey-Merritt even theoretically provides value at that price.
Yeah, so the Rodriguez detail, I think, was other than by you, largely too hastily brushed aside by the fantasy community. Like people just kind of like,
he's so good, dude. Chris Rodriguez can run for like 1,400 yards if they give him the chance. He's a really, really good running back.
Yeah, he was a dang problem at Kentucky. Excuse me, but people just kind of caught wind of the Jacory Croskey-Merritt idea, and then like the crazy story of him getting like ruled ineligible for some wild reason involving like a jersey swap.
It was like he played one, like Arizona was just being weird, and they had another player where they had a problem with that too. That coach was getting terrible advice to players in the transfer portal or whatever, because like they solicited Croskey-Merritt to play there when he just used his eligibility already. Like they just said like, well, what if we just play him anyway? And the NCAA was like, actually, you can't. Like, oh, okay. I guess we won't try to sneak him out for a 6th year without getting like a waiver or whatever.
Yeah, Brent Brennan, kind of a dunce. But all told, now we've seen Jacory Croskey-Merritt go from like a fun late round dart to I
want to name a couple I want to raise a couple examples, John.
Here we go.
In terms of like really crazy late season too, late in draft season, out of control fantasy hype.
I do think Jacory Croskey-Merritt's better than all three of these players, but remember when people are taking like Mike Gillislee in the 6th round,
Sure.
off of really bad analytics pushed forth by Warren Sharp that identified Mike Gillislee and Dion Lewis as two of the best runners in the NFL because they just had very specialized uses in a Patriots offense that was still good at the time. So specifically the takes there were like Mike Gillislee he's the running back you have to get this year. And Dion Lewis, he's better than Derrick Henry. Don't worry about that guy. So like that's one memorable one that clearly people have forgotten about. Darwin Thompson is another one that people have clearly forgotten about. And the one that even I almost forgot about. So it's not reasonable to recall this guy at all, but there's this player from Abilene Christian that the Rams drafted in the 7th round like 10 years ago named Daryl Richardson. And he was going in like the 4th and 5th rounds of drafts right before the season started because it was like Zach Stacy versus Daryl Richardson, and Zach Stacy got hurt or something, or like they named Daryl Richardson the starter. So there's a pretty healthy precedent for players rising the way Croskey-Merritt has, only to horrifically disappoint everybody who was chasing him. And I think he's going to be better than that. I do think Croskey-Merritt clearly has some amount of raw running ability. I do question though the volume capacity, and I question the premise that he's even as good as Rodriguez at anything.
I think the Darwin Thompson one really took me back to in like the absolute apex of that hype. In that same auction, I pulled the same move, I think, with Darwin Thompson, where I threw him out at like 7, froze the room, got him, and I was like, game over. You guys are done. So I'm hoping that history doesn't completely repeat itself, even if the process.
I think Croskey-Merritt's gonna run. He's gonna get like 100 something carries. He's gonna give you like 600 rushing yards and some entertaining highlights. But it's like Daniels, Eckler, they're already taking a problematic share of the backfield production at both the expense of Croskey-Merritt and Rodriguez. So yeah, if Rodriguez is getting short yardage stuff, it's like what even is there to do if you're Croskey-Merritt at that point?
Right. No, exactly. So that's going to wrap it up for our late draft season, sort of quick hitters, guys to pay attention to in your drafts this weekend. Again, guys like Puka Nacua, Tyreek Hill, Breece Hall, and Chris Godwin have fallen a bit over the course of draft season. And Chase Brown, you might need to adjust your eyes. He now goes in the 2nd round. TreVeyon Henderson goes in the early 4th. Emeka Egbuka goes in the 5th. And JCM, Jacory Croskey-Merritt, someone that you can't wait past the 8th round much to acquire. So that's gonna round it out for us. A big thanks to our sponsors over at Circa, over at Fantasy Sports Knockout, and over at Fantrax. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening. And this time next week, we'll be talking about week 1. Very excited. Thanks for listening.